One of the important things that we need to understand as brewers is what basically makes beer. So the key ingredient to beer, well, there's 4 key ingredients to beer: water, malt, hops, and yeast. So yeast converts wort into beer. So today I'm going to talk about the grains that we use, and essentially I'm just going to start from the top with the most used, and we're going to make our way all the way through to adjuncts, which is other things that we put into beer. Barley. Barley is a brewer's best friend. There's 2-row and 6-row. Those are the primary ones. That's how many kernels are on the actual grain waving in the wind. And maltsters collect that barley, and to make it usable to us, because barley in its raw form really isn't ready or good for us to use in beer, so they have to go through a malting process. So maltsters, who are the fine folks that do that, have actually been held to really high standards and had to learn the technology on making a very consistent product, mostly by big beer. So thank you, Budweiser, for driving consistency in the product that we can get. There is no better time in history to be a home brewer than right now, because we have easy access to all of these, buying it online, local homebrew shops. This is just one of those aspects that even the most hardcore DIY home brewer, I've never seen it successfully done to where they can make their own barley and toast it, and or rather malt it successfully. So the malting process is essentially what happens after it's been collected and stored for a certain amount of time. So that is what gives our grains the color and the sugar content, and so the starches, the flavor, all of the different elements, including the nitrogen and the nutrients that the yeast want to eat. Once the grains are collected, they're then going to be sent into steep. And so there is actually a micropilar, which is a tiny hole that is on the back end of the grain seed, and that water is going to seep in there and essentially wake that kernel back up, saying, hey, it's time for you to send out roots. It's steeped for a specific amount of time. That allows what's called the endosperm to grow, and that is essentially a baby root that's going to be growing, and they're looking for generally about 2/3 of the length of the grain, and you can see that on the backside, and that's the indication that that conversion is happening inside. So essentially those the enzymes and the starches are being woken up and turned into the sugars that we want. Now the amount of time, and so after that is steeped, they then pause that with a drying process. So they go in and completely dry the malt out, and then comes the kilning process. So kilning is exactly what it sounds like. They're essentially toasting it to certain levels. So starting over here, the standard 2-row, it is going to be malted to a specific, we calculate the toast level in Lovibond. So that's basically the color or the toast level. So basic 2-row is the backbone for all of the beers that I make, and it is toasted to a Lovibond of, like, this particular one is 1.8, but it'll be in that like 2 Lovibond range. Now, then we get into specialty grains. Specialty grains, you're gonna see them, it's called Crystal, Carafa, C, and that comes right before a number, so C15 or Crystal 15. And that's what we have right here actually is a Crystal 15, so that's that 15L. That's how toasted this is. And see, you can see a difference here between the 2 Lovibond and the 15 Lovibond. So even on that, there's descriptors here. So this one, for example, is gonna have light golden color. It's a subtle, sweet, malty, mild caramel flavor, and that comes right off of the bag. I don't recommend going off of these descriptors to make your recipes until you are very familiar with it. So as I've said before, go get the kits from whatever online retailer or recipe kit from your homebrew shop. They're gonna have the predisposed amounts, pre-calculated amounts for that particular recipe, because this is what gives us the levers to pull to change the color, the sweetness, the maltiness, all of those different factors come from this. And so that Lovibond scale goes up and it stops. It's like five Lovibond increments on the scale. Right here, you can see a color difference, and some of these are more charred than not. Say it's this one, for example, is burnt on one side, and they're not all like that, but essentially the average of that grain is, this particular one is a 120 Lovibond, so C120 or Crystal 120. This one is Caramel Malt 120L, that's how it's labeled, but that's all kind of the same thing. And then you get up into the higher spectrum, chocolate malt, for example. Here, this is what I would use in my porter to give it just a black appearance. You do not need very much, it's a small percentage of that grain bill, but you can just take it and actually smell it and taste it. It's very crunchy compared to, say, two-row. And just the flavors that are coming into my mouth right now is like black coffee, coffee bean, like as its name indicates, like a really dark chocolate. And so it's pretty cool to watch these ingredients get used. And then when you finally sample the final product, you're like, hey, you can actually go back and take the same grains and taste them as you go, and pick those out of that beer that you're now tasting. Another factor that helps maltsters retain consistency batch over batch, because every single field is gonna come out a little bit different, say on the chemical composition of that particular grain might have more of one character than another. So to maintain consistency, they will actually blend batches. So 2 different fields get harvested, they all get kilned the same. They're gonna blend those together so that the final product that I receive is gonna be a consistent thing. I want every beer that I make, if I'm looking for consistency, to always come out the same. So to do that, they blend it. Just like whiskey makers would make a blended whiskey, say Johnny Walker, for example. Every time you have a Johnny Walker Blue, it always tastes as close to the last time that you had it. So we've talked about base malts, that's the 2-row or 6-row. There are other versions of that as well, say European base malts, so that would be Vienna or Munich malts. It's kind of the same thing, it just depending on where it's grown, it has a different character. So the European versions, for example, have more of a biscuity flavor, kind of a different depth, and so that's really a fun lever to play with, since most of our stuff is made with 2-row. If you veer into those on a recipe that you already know and love, you might like it more, and so it's always worth exploring. Next, we talked about the specialty grains, and so that's your caramel, that's the different toast level of that same grain, and that leads us into adjuncts. So adjuncts is anything that is not base malt, and so here, for example, I have flaked oats. This is one that is commonly used. This gives a beer a cool mouth feel, for example, and it also contributes to the flavor. Next, we can talk about corn, for example. Corn is a very popular one for, say, a Mexican lager because it gives it an actual tortilla flavor. Adjuncts also start veering into weird land now. It's more and more popular to be able to find a beer that's, say, for example, used breakfast cereal like Fruity Pebbles, or whatever the brewer wants to put into a beer, that's considered an adjunct. It doesn't have to be weird like actual pastries or breakfast cereal. Other common ones are, say, candy syrup, for example, and that adds a kind of a molasses type flavor to Belgian beers. Ultimately, sky's the limit on what you want to add, but I tend to lean towards very traditional recipes and beer styles because I just want to pick up a 6-pack of the weird stuff to try. That's not really my jam, but that doesn't mean that you can't get in and experiment with absolutely anything that you want to put in there. So there's anything from spices to breakfast cereal, it's all fair game, as long as it's being sanitary. So in the mash, again, we're gonna bring this up to a boil. So it's not so much a contamination, it's just how are those ingredients gonna interact with boiling wort or with hops. That's kind of part of the fun part of home brewing, where we get to experiment and do whatever we want. So lastly, how do you actually get a grain bill? So the grain bill is what we call all of the ingredients that are gonna go into the mash. The recipe that we are making right here is a red ale, and I do recommend just starting with pre-made kits. So you can go online and find 5-gallon batch recipes. That's kind of the standard that we use. Those can be scaled on software or whatever, but this is a perfect example of when you are first starting, don't overthink it. Just go with what the pros have made and stand on their shoulders as you're getting your feet under you. So this red, just as an example, this is what the all grain grain bill looks like. So it lists it right here. So we have the all grain kit. The extract kit is also a different place where people can start, but I'm teaching you all grain, so that's what you want to pay attention to. This particular one is 10 pounds of 2-row pale, 2.25 pounds of crystal 75. Again, this is like 120 and this is 15, so it's the toast level looks like right in the middle of those. And then 8 ounces of crystal 120, which actually is this, so that's this toast level. This beer is going to come out red. It's going to have a clear red tint to it if you hold it up to the light, which is always beautiful to me. So that brownish red color actually comes from the combination of the 120 and for this one, the C75. They're not interchangeable, so 120, you can't just double up and use twice the amount of C60. Just choose the right one. But that is the list that you can then go to your local homebrew shop and say, these are the grains that I need, and they'll pull those out of their bins and mill them for you if you need them milled. That's how you get your grain bill. I do recommend starting with the kits just because it makes life so much easier. I still turn to them even though I'm perfectly capable of making a recipe. A lot of times I want to try a new style, just go with something that's time tested and proven. Lastly, the software that's out there. So Beersmith and Brewfather are the two main ones that I use. The repertoires of recipes there's thousands to pick from. You simply don't have to jump into making your own recipes, and that would kind of be insane. Kind of like try and make a brand new cook, invent the recipe to a good lasagna. It just doesn't work that way. So use the ones that are easily accessible and free, and get your feet under you before you start tweaking those numbers and doing that. That being said, once you get your feet under you and you start understanding the different ways that these grains interact and how they affect the final product, that's when you can go in and actually use sliders. Say on Brewfather, for example, you type in the ingredients that you want to use. It'll predict the SRM, which is the color of the beer, the alcohol content that comes out of the starches that you're pulling out of ththese grains, and all of those factors get calculated for you, so you can kind of play around. You don't have to just shoot in the dark and hope for the best. All of these tools are so magnificent for a home brewer, and again, I say there's no better time on earth or in history to be a home brewer because we have access to all of this.